I'll open this Senate Committee of Commerce. Good morning, and thank you all for being here. We're going to start off with House Bill 314 with Rep. Nunez, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This is my maiden voyage to come visit this side of the House, so let's be kind.
Welcome to the big league.
Thank you. That's what I've heard. It's the big leagues when you go over there. For the record, my name is Herschel Nunez. I represent Hillsborough District 37, the towns of Hudson and Pelham. I live in Pelham. I'm here today to introduce to you House Bill 314, which is a bill that will affect the relative to homestead food operations licensure. Committee members and Mr. Chairman, throughout the pandemic and a little bit before, I had the opportunity to meet with a few constituents in my area and other areas talking about the homestead food operations and what was important to them. As you know, this affects many people all across our state, not just in my area. What we're doing with this bill, I'm going to keep this short and sweet, is that we have amended the bill out of the House. It was a bigger bill. In all transparency, I worked with the HHS committee and a subcommittee over there, and we had a bipartisan agreement that we would take the most important part of the bill and push that through. It came out of HHS on consent, and then we went to eDNA. It came out of eDNA on consent, and now we're here with you, and we're very fortunate to get this far. So what we want to do is we want to change the cap. Before you have to get a commercial license as a homestead food kitchen operator from $20,000 a year to $35,000 a year. Now, meeting with people and then going through the pandemic, these homesteaders suffered because they were not able to go out in public and sell their wares. Farmers markets were shut down. Their farm stands were not visited. The people who sold food out of their house were not able to sell food out of their house, and they suffered greatly financially from this. As we move back into the area where they can do these again because we're coming out of the pandemic and people are gathering and farmers markets are open back up, their farm stands are selling again, they're finding that their costs to do business have risen about 200%. I don't know if any of you do anything with crafts or make food in your home to sell, but as a person, I used to be an organic soap vendor at these farmers markets, right? Just to buy a 5-gallon vat of coconut oil to do that, to make the soap that would do that, it's double the cost now of what it was before. So I'm no longer doing it because it's too expensive. These people are being affected the same way. In order for them to continue to bring in income for their households, and their households, they need this money. Sometimes it's what makes the difference on whether or not their farm makes it or not. They are all very encouraged that this bill is here. So I ask you to consider that raising the cap from $20,000 to $35,000 to help them cover their costs. They won't really be making much more money, but they won't be losing any more money. And I think that we really want to give them a bit of COVID relief. We want to help these homesteaders. I have information to give you. I'll set it to the side whenever I'm done, and I'll take any questions anybody has.
I do. Thank you very much. So right now, one of these homestead operations can sell $20,000 worth of cookies a year without having to be regulated with a commercial kitchen.
That is correct.
And there has been how many problems?
Well, the problems is that what it costs for them to do business now.
How many complaints have they had on their operations during that time where there's been a health problem or anything?
I don't know of people being fined or anything like that for
Right.
being out of regulation. They understand the HHS guidelines very well.
Great. So this would just raise it to the 30.
It's just the money. Yes, sir.
Nice. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. The only question I have on line 9, it says the maximum annual gross sales of food as this RSA 143A5. Is that just saying from 20,000 to 35? Is that all that's going?
The annual group, yes, sir. That's what it does. And just to let you know, if there's anything hazardous, this doesn't include anything like that. This is only dealing with the cap before you get a commercial license. All of the guidelines that are set up for the homesteaders under the HHS guidelines all remain intact. Everything that they're governed by now, they will continue to be governed by. It's just going to help them because the cost of everything has gone up so much.
Great. Senator?
Thank you, Senator. I don't see any samples. It's early, 9 o'clock. Next time, samples. Thank you. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, sir.
So, yeah, this is great. Thank you very much. You do know, you don't know, but I'll tell you, I have never cooked cookies or whoopie pies myself, and I depend on these farmers markets to get my staples. So thank you very much for bringing this important piece of legislation forward.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much, committee. I appreciate your time.
Is it Dennis Acton? Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senators. Basically, Herschel Nato was I ran the subcommittee for HHS committee. And so we went through a meeting and a series of efforts to try to boil this down to something that was meaningful and could pass. And but just to reiterate now, and it'll be done, people are hurting right now. They need to maximize the value they can make from their homesteads. This allows them to go a little bit further before you go out and have to spend $50,000 to $100,000 on a commercial kitchen. So that's basically the point that we're trying to make here. I'm all set. Thank you.
Great. Questions?
All set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Lekis?
Alicia Lekis, Hillsborough 37, Hudson and Pelham, and I live in Hudson. And Representative Nunes said pretty much what I was going to say. I did want to add that the whole commercial kitchen idea has kept many people, including my daughter when she had Lyme, out of the market, basically. She lived in a mobile home, but she made wonderful stuff, but she couldn't sell it. She could take it for people to eat, which they gladly ate, and said, oh, you should sell this. I know people who would buy this. Nope, no commercial kitchen, no selling at the time. And so she made cheesecakes. Those don't fit under this because refrigeration, which she had a refrigerator. But at any rate, I just want you to consider that this is an area that you might want to be thinking about opening up. It became very narrow, but when I started with this with Rep. Nunes a couple years ago, it was a much broader thing. And so I just want to put that thought in there to broadening this could help people who have problems. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Questions? Ross Connolly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for holding this hearing today. I will be very brief. Just for the record, my name is Ross Connolly. I'm the Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity, here to voice our support for HB 314. Obviously, we're all very aware of the inflationary problems that every Granite Stater is dealing with. And this especially impacts these homesteaders who operate these small businesses that provide locally source products that people are looking for in their communities. It attracts people to the community, as Representative Nunes pointed out. And this just gives small little regulatory relief in a time when we have rising costs everywhere. And these folks, who a lot of them started during the pandemic, trying to make an extra bit of discretionary income out of their homes, that this little bit of regulatory relief could go a long way towards helping these folks. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? You're off the hook.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on House Bill 314? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's my auction gavel. And, nice. I'll now open the hearing on House Bill 1048. John, would you like to introduce it? Good morning, Representative.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Senators. For the record, Representative John Patusek from Rockingham 6 right now in Derry. I'm here to introduce HB 1048 at the request of the Insurance Department to incorporate the recent interest rate reduction for individual deferred annuities, say that fast, that was adopted by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, NAIC, to their standard non-forfeiture model law. The insurance industry is very much in favor of this proposal. Ms. Roni Karnas is here from the Insurance Department to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for your consideration of this legislation.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions? Thank you very much. Ms. Carnes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Senators. For the record, my name is Roni Karnas. I work at the New Hampshire Insurance Department. This proposal seeks to amend RSA 409A, which is modeled after an NAIC Model Law 805. That law affects individual deferred annuities, and this amendment seeks to change the interest rate. It reduces the interest rate to 0.15%. This change was instituted at the NAIC in 2020 at the request of the insurance industry due to the low interest rate environment was adversely affecting the ability to offer a lot of annuity products, specifically the individual deferred annuities. The NAIC committees conducted working group sessions and ultimately voted to adopt a change, reducing the interest rate to 0.15%. That change occurred and was voted in by the NAIC Major Executive Committee. I think it was December of 2020. It was a little too late for the next session for New Hampshire to move forward with legislation at that time. So we've put forth this proposal for this session. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So this will reduce it from 1% to 0.15%.
It does.
Okay. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to speak on House Bill 1048? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Thank you very much. Yeah, you gotta be, these are rough crowds. We got 5 minutes. John, are you putting this in for his? Okay, thanks. Yeah, it is. Oops.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. No, the guys who testified put his stuff over there.
Was your son back yet? Your older one? Is he still on the trip?
He was back for 2 weeks. Flew to Florida. They flew him out to LA Sunday.
For the interview?
No, yeah,
Oh.
it's all set.
Oh, he
Today he's
did?
flying to Argentina
Oh,
to
really?
start the,
So what's the turnaround from the filming to when it aired?
I'll open the hearing on House Bill 1249 and Representative.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, fellow senators, fellow senator. I don't want to be a senator. Thank you. Senators, for the record, Representative John Petusik, Rockingham 6, Derry, here to introduce HB 1249 relative to weights and measures. I'm standing in for Representative Hunt, who is the Chairman of Commerce. This bill renames two license fee categories in weights and measures as a definition for precision scales and legal for trade scale. This bill is a request of the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food. It's pretty self-explanatory. For precision scales and legal for trade scales, it brings them up to date with the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology Handbook, number 44, and is approved by the National Type Evaluation Program, NTEP. I'd be willing to take any questions, but this was not mine, so I'll defer to any other authority that's here, but I'll try to answer any questions you might have for me.
That's great. I think we'll hold off and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Cheryl Ayer?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Good morning.
members of the committee. For the record, my name is Cheryl Ayer. I'm the Director of Weights and Measures, which is under the Department of Agriculture, Markets and Food. I'm here to speak in support of House Bill 1249. This is a housekeeping item that gives clarity to two scale categories and includes two definitions that give additional clarity to the proposed changes. The term analytical balance in our current statute is vague as to what category of scale is referenced, since analytical is a term most often used in a laboratory setting. The scale categories in RSA 438-10A are used to determine how commercially used devices are licensed with our division. This housekeeping item will clear up any ambiguity by changing the term analytical to precision, defining precision, and adding additional language to the 100 pounds or less category to include the words other than precision scales. So each scale category will be properly defined. Thank you for your time and consideration of the proposed amendment, and I welcome any questions that you may have.
So, guesstimating the weight of something isn't lawful when you're so,
That's not a good idea.
okay. And 2 grams in metric. Precision scales, they are exactly within 2 grams.
Well, what we did was we looked at NIST Handbook 44 and what it defines as precision. And so we took that definition as to put in the amendment so that it was clearly defined, because when you have a category that says 100 pounds or less, that could include any of your gram scales, any of your scales that are used to weigh precious metals, jewelry, spices, any of your higher priced commodities that people want to have a more fine resolution, because we do allow tolerances in weights and measures. And when you're off just one division of the scale, then that's an impact to both the consumer and to the business owner.
So this doesn't get into hardware sales, does it?
No.
This is strictly food and metals.
What do you mean by hardware?
Like if I go to the store, my local hardware store, and get 2 pounds of D10 nails, and they put them on the baby scales, does it affect, do they have to get new scales for that?
Yes. So
Oh, they do.
those baby scales that you may have seen in the past are not legal for trade. And so the category 100 pounds or less, that's actually the category of scale that someone who is purchasing that type of product over would be utilized.
Okay. So the baby scales aren't legal for
No.
trade?
They are not.
Well, I'll have to get rid of mine.
You can use it yourself. That's fine.
For sale?
For your
selling?
own self.
Oh, for my own self, yeah.
No commercial transaction.
Oh, either.
Yeah. My baby's really high. Questions? Nope, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much.
And that's all we have. Anyone else wishing to speak on House Bill 1249? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing. Thank you. want to get done with it, though. This one might be a little bit longer. Yeah, just a little bit longer. What time are we starting this one? 9:30? Yeah. Get a cold this weekend?
What's that?
You catch your cold this weekend?
Everybody, that was like Perkins was on one side, she was Sharon, it's get a cold, and everybody at home has a cold.
Yeah, couldn't avoid it.
You've been sick all this weekend?
On House Bill 1282 and Rep. Keller.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Representative Josh O'Kella, representing Rockingham 33, Fremont, Danville, and Brentwood. I am here to introduce HB 1282, relative to the records of communication common carriers. So what the current law does is it requires anyone that has facilitates communication between people Facebook, Google, Craigslist, your website that you let people log in and comment on are all regulated under communication common carriers under our current definition. And it says that upon demand from the AG's office, they have to provide their data to the department. The information specifically laid out in the law includes names and address of persons who are listed, and their phone numbers, their billing records, what they subscribe to, the length of the service, and but sometimes and you will see in the examples that I gave, some of these subpoenas ask for more things that are listed inside of the list in the RSA. So I wouldn't necessarily, it isn't clear whether this list is exclusive or any records that of the companies regarding that person could be seized, especially on the top page of this. It says this example subpoena given to Facebook, that any, number 3 says any other subscriber information, identification or identity information for the subscriber, including email address and IP addresses. So those aren't listed inside of the law as something that you're allowed to ask for, but they do ask for it. And then the other information I passed out is that Apple and Facebook have just admitted that they have given out people's private information to people that forge these requests. So to not state actors. And that is, of course, concerning to me and the constituents, my constituents, and hopefully everyone in the state, especially because we just, in 2018 passed this new Article 2B constitutional amendment guaranteeing individuals' right to live free from government intrusion into private or personal information. And all these examples that I gave are examples of subpoenas that were issued after the constitutional amendment came into place. And one of the things that is concerning, in addition to the fact that people's records are given to the government without a search warrant, is that there is no opportunity for these businesses to say no. And therefore, it is violating their Fourth Amendment rights to their own data. Because they also, in addition to the people, if you can either have the argument that the information is the people's data, and therefore search warrants should be required, or that it's the company's data, and the company should be able to require a search warrant to get access to their data. And there are some companies that don't care about that so much, but there are other companies that are touting themselves as privacy-focused companies and want to exercise their rights as much as possible. And so I have talked to a couple of lawyers, including the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and he agrees that it's possible that the way that this law is written, where they are not allowed to refuse, is a violation of their Fourth Amendment rights and could be challenged. This law could be challenged. And so all my bill is seeking to do is to say, no, you can't reach around the Fourth Amendment and get information about people without a search warrant. Sometimes people say like, oh, we need this information, because we don't know who this person is. We just have their phone number or something like that. But in some of the examples that I gave you, the people have on this, the second sheet, they had the phone number, the address, and the physical address of the person, their name, everything about them, but they still wanted to get all their phone records. So they would be able, they already have information about this person enough to create a search warrant if indeed a crime had been committed. And so I think that this legislation is important to really protect both people from what I see as abuses of their information, and for companies to be able to say, we want to have a contract with our customer that we're going to keep this information private unless we receive a subpoena or receive an actual search warrant, and that should be within their right to do. And right now, under the current law, it is not their right to do. And so I am hoping that you will support this legislation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Senator?
So I have one regarding the information that you presented us. I mean, as you can see at the end of the first paragraph, it says, having been so authorized and having reasonable grounds to believe that the communications carrier service has been, is being, or may be used for an unlawful purpose. I hope there are others that will testify, but how would you balance that with a situation like child pornography, where something is imminent, the child perhaps is in danger of more physical crime? Doesn't law enforcement have an obligation to at least request? And if the company chooses to fight the information, don't you think that there is an obligation to try to protect people at the same time and balance those interests?
Thank you for the question. So you're right that in the current language, there is, all they have to do is have a suspicion that a crime has been committed. Under a search warrant, they would need probable cause that a crime has been committed, not just a suspicion. And it is, I do agree that it's possible that, a law enforcement agency could come and say, hey, we would like this information. And then, but does the company have the right to refuse and say, no, I need you to get a search warrant? And right now, they do not have that right. And I think that is a Fourth Amendment breach. It's because under the current law, it says that it is that soon as they have been furnished the written demand, they shall furnish the information to the Attorney General. And so they are not allowed to not furnish that information. And so it isn't really an ask question, it's a force question. And they are forced to do it without a search warrant, and therefore is a violation of what I believe is their Fourth Amendment rights. Now, there are companies that will, if they are made aware of violations or crimes that are happening on their platform, that they will give those to the authorities. Absolutely. If they know a crime has been committed, harboring that crime is a problem. However, if they have no knowledge of a crime being committed, right? Some of these companies are not like, some of these companies may disagree, or the crime may not have been committed using their like a platform, right? They could have just been, some of the things, the requests not only go to Facebook and, but they could also go to Verizon, right? Your phone company doesn't know what you talked about on the phone, right? So they don't know whether or not that actually was a crime, what you talked about. And so they would have to be trusting the government to have enough information, because it says we suspect something, right? If they ask the search warrant, then it's we have probable cause, essentially to arrest this person. We have probable cause to search their records, right? Whereas right now, a suspicion that something has done is not enough to arrest someone, even right now, right? So.
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you did mention a former Chief Justice that you said reviewed this. Do you mind sharing who that was?
Yes, is the one that's currently a representative. His name is what? Yeah, Representative Lynn, former Chief Justice. Yeah.
So
Thank you.
would this prevent a carrier from reporting without inquiry from the AG's office, anything that they thought might be unlawful?
No. So in addition to, no, I don't believe that is how this should be read. But also to the prior senator's question, there are exceptions in RSA 644A3, which is the exceptions for a search warrant requirement for when they are seeking to track your location data for your phone. There is emergency situations where you can get an exception to a search warrant requirement. And so I would also, some of those exceptions include emergency services. It is also if the device has been taken by a third party, if the informed consent of parents or the owner of the actual device, and or if there is an emergency of immediate danger, life, death, serious physical injury, or any other legally recognized exceptions to search warrants,
So,
like someone is going to destroy evidence and stuff like that.
so I'm looking at line 4 through 7.
Okay.
And I'm reading, shall require a valid search warrant before providing a government entity with any information related to its customers. So you're telling me if Facebook was patrolling their own site and they ran across something like child abuse, they would have to wait for a search warrant in order to bring this to government attention?
So this, so I do not believe that that is so what we're talking about here is like the records of the subscriber information, their name, their address, and their phone number, not what they post. What is required right now for if you wanted to get their actual like posts would be a search warrant unless they've committed a crime. You don't have a protection for criminal activities. So if you committed a crime, there is no Fourth Amendment protection. You're not protected. And so the carriers would be completely within their rights and actually obligated to share that information with the authorities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keen Wong?
Morning, Chairperson and members of the committee. My name is Keen Mei Wong. I am the Tax Policy Counsel from the Department of Revenue. Today, the department does not have a position on the bill, HB 1282. However, we want to bring attention to the committee that the enactment of this bill could potentially have cause problems for our audits in terms of the communication services tax audits that we administer. Communication services tax is a tax that's imposed on communication services, and it's calculated on the it's imposed on the users of the services, and it's collected by the retailers and then remitted onto the department. So it's similar to a meals and rooms tax kind of a scenario. During our audits, we would request for records from the carriers that would include the phone numbers, the names, and the addresses of their customers. We don't request for all that information. We request we do a test check for specific months, and then we request those information, and we do have protection on that information. We do not disclose that information out of the department. There are statutes in place that is within the CST statute as well as the DRA statute in general, RSA 21J, that prohibits, unless in certain limited circumstances, it prohibits the department from disclosing taxpayer information outside of the department. So, and this from in terms of a value from a CST revenue as well as a CST audit for fiscal year 21, CST revenue was about $40 million to the state, and the tax notice revenue was about $600,000. The enactment of this statute expanded the original RSA 76B, that limit that was applicable to the Attorney General's request. It expanded that to all government agencies, which includes the DRA. So we think that with this additional standard of a probable cause, we're not certain how this would implicate how we proceed with a CST audit. It potentially could result in us not being able to, because we require information from the carriers. Without that information, there's nowhere else we could obtain information to conduct an audit. With that, I hope that the committee considers this information in your decision making. If you have any questions, I'm able to take them.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Amanda Noonan? Good morning.
As you just heard, the department also has some concerns about impact.
Oh, could you turn on your mic, please?
Sorry. The department also has some concerns about perhaps an unintended consequence of this bill as drafted and the impact it would have on not just the ability of the department, but potentially on the Public Utilities Commission and any federal regulatory agencies with jurisdiction over telecommunications services providers to undertake the important work that we all do on a daily basis.
The department would request the committee consider adding language to this bill that would allow telecommunication providers to provide customer information to the department, to the Public Utilities Commission, to any federal agency with regulatory jurisdiction over the provider without first obtaining a search warrant. Without this additional language, the ability of the department and the other agencies to work with and assist customers of telecommunications providers or to investigate any matters brought before any one of those agencies would be significantly impacted and to the detriment, I think, of consumers in the state of New Hampshire. The information that we at the department obtain specific to customers is treated confidentially. It is not subject to right to know requests in accordance with a New Hampshire Supreme Court order some years ago. And so that information is maintained privately for customers. The department would suggest adding the following language to Section 1 of the bill. And I do have a copy of this. Section 1 reads, every communications carrier is defined in RSA 570A:1 Roman 9 shall require a valid search warrant for providing a government entity with any information related to its customers unless the request falls under the exceptions listed in RSA 644A:3. And we would insert, or unless the information is requested by the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission, the New Hampshire Department of Energy, or a federal regulatory agency with jurisdiction over the communications common carrier, period. That would be the additional language that we would request. And with that change, the department would be neutral on the remainder of the bill.
Thank you. Yeah. If you could just give it to the clerk, please. Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric Kinsman. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I appreciate your time this morning. My name is Eric Kinsman. I'm a lieutenant with the Portsmouth Police Department and the current commander for the New Hampshire Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. I'm here before you this morning to speak against House Bill 1282 with regard to the possibility of requiring a search warrant to obtain information which we can currently legally obtain through administrative processes will absolutely have a dire consequence which will impact child victims here in the state, which we are trying very hard to protect. As a matter of perspective, ICAC task forces across the country receive a majority.
I'm having a hard time hearing, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, there are people in the audience speaking.
I'm sorry.
They could go outside, because I'm.
Yeah, we have a difficult time with the acoustics here. Please take conversations out in the hall. Except yours, sir.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
So, thank you. As a matter of perspective, New Hampshire ICAC task forces across the country receive a majority of their work from cyber tips, which we receive from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Virginia. Cyber tip reports are generated when ISPs or internet service providers like Facebook, Comcast, Instagram, and literally hundreds and hundreds of others, when they are federally mandated, they're required to report to NCMEC anytime there is child sexual abuse material which appears on their platforms. When they report that, the NCMEC actually provides and they create what's called a cyber tip. Those cyber tips are sent out to ICAC task forces across the country based on the geolocation of the IP address for the suspected individual. Again, as a matter of perspective and to give you a sense of the numbers that we're talking about, In 2020, the number of cyber tips reported by NCMEC to individual task forces across the country jumped from over 16 million reports in 2019 to over 21 million in 2020. In 2021, that number shot up to over 29 million individual reports. Keep in mind that each one of those reports has at least one child victim in it. The numbers are so overwhelming, but by the time an ICAC task force receives a cyber tip, it's already 2 months old. And that's simply because of the resources that they have available to them, and then being forced to deal with the numbers that they're being forced to deal with. So when we receive a cyber tip from NCMEC, it's actually 2 months past when the incident date is alleged to have occurred. Just to bring it closer to home, here in New Hampshire, we have seen an incredible increase in cyber tip reports over the last few years. As recently in 2018, New Hampshire ICAC was consistently fielding an average of 35 to 50 cyber tips per month. Last year, we were averaging 90 to 100 per month. And so far in 2022, we're averaging over 150 cyber tips per month. Again, those are potentially 150 new open ICAC-related investigations each month, again, with their own individual, at least one child victim. And those aren't just child victims here in the state of New Hampshire. Sometimes those are multiple victims who are being impacted from all over the world. A major part of our mission with the task force is to provide assets and training to law enforcement agencies across the state in an effort to investigate these child exploitation cases. Given the numbers that I provided, we are already extremely limited with the resources that we need to investigate these crimes in a timely fashion. And please understand that New Hampshire ICAC, we have always and will continue to always obtain a search warrant to obtain content information of a person's account. But to require a search warrant in addition to the search warrants that we would already complete in an effort just to gain subscriber information would have a detriment to our ability to investigate these crimes in a timely fashion. Again, to explain it a little bit better, when we receive an IP address as a suspected IP address in a report from NCMEC, that doesn't mean that the IP address that is associated with that person is necessarily our suspect. We simply don't have the information at that time to correlate an IP address with an actual individual person. When we follow through with the administrative process that we have now, that will give us subscriber information. But again, we don't know that at that moment that that's our suspect. It takes a lot of time to develop our investigation. For example, I can think of many, many, many times where an IP address might be associated with a person who's simply paying the bill, but the suspect is actually just a different resident in that house. But again, we wouldn't know that at the time. So to the necessary, in an effort to, if we would need a search warrant in that beginning, we simply wouldn't have enough to obtain a search warrant. So I wanted to kind of give you a perspective from ICAC's standpoint, and I welcome any questions that you may have.
So these cyber tips, it's kind of what I was getting at with the representative. Do you think this would stop those cyber tips from coming in if this was to pass?
No, the internet service providers are already federally mandated to report any type of child sexual abuse material that comes across. But because NCMEC is not a law enforcement entity, they can only do so much with the information that's provided by the internet service providers. They have an IP address, they may have an email address, but they can't do the investigative process that a law enforcement agency can in order to identify an actual suspect. So what they will do is they compile a report. This cyber tip is basically a PDF report that we receive, which includes the material itself that is believed to be child sexual abuse material, as well as information, with this individual cyber tip. Sometimes cyber tips are 7 pages long. Sometimes they're 30 or 40 pages long, depending upon the material that's sent, how it's sent. It also includes who sent it as well as who received it, because it's a crime to both distribute it as well as possess it and manufacture it. So therefore, all that information is included in those cyber tips. So they're already federally mandated to report it.
Okay. Questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
John Williams.
Chairman French and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. For the record, my name is John Williams. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services. Although the department's not taking an official position on the bill, HB 1282, I believe that the commentary that you heard from the lieutenant from the Portsmouth Police Department spoke volumes in terms of what we'd have to offer here today. What is missing from the bill in front of you, well, couple of key points, is that under current law, and I'm hoping that there might be a member from the Department of Justice to provide information to this committee here today. There certainly was one. I see somebody smiling, so I see that. So that's going to really abbreviate my testimony. The current law that's before you under the Department of Justice statute came into effect in 1969. You may recall, for those of us who did go through law school, and some of us who actually led a life being an assistant county attorney, that was during a time when the development of law around Fourth Amendment rights, expectations of privacy were well developed. And certainly the state of New Hampshire, as well as our agency, respects the rights of privacy. However, it needs to be balanced against protecting children. And one thing that you don't see in this bill, or a couple of things, is one, it expands it to all state agencies. So the potential to going from the authority of the Department of Justice expanding it to all agencies is inherent with creating many unintended consequences. I'd suggest that the amendments that were offered by the Department of Energy, very well thought out to try to come up with a solution to what their perceived problem was, unfortunately will not work for probably the remainder of others who are out there, particularly those who are concerned about protecting children. What is missing from this bill is it actually doesn't incorporate paragraph 3 in the legislation. The bill was amended, it was originally enacted back in 1969, but was amended back in 2001 when we started to getting an awareness over cybersecurity and protection of children, particularly for exploitation through the computer. And specifically referenced in paragraph Roman 3 is the delegation of authority of the Attorney General's office to County Attorney's office to proceed with doing investigations, receiving information based upon articulable suspicion in the realm of both crimes related or potential crimes related to the Controlled Drug Act under RSA Chapter 318B. But more importantly, from the department's perspective, because that's why I'm here today, is about protecting children, is it takes away that delegation authority for the use of these administrative subpoenas to obtain baseline information so they can conduct their investigations through law enforcement as it relates specifically. And it actually cites it in that particular provision under Chapter 649B. 649B is the computer pornography and child exploitation prevention, and that's specifically stated in current law. And so that really concludes the substance of my testimony. I am available to take questions, but I do think that you're going to be much better served by a member from the Department of Justice than that from Health and Human Services that relates to questions that might be related to the impact that I spoke of, as well as the lieutenant from the Portsmouth Police Department.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Ward? Yeah, I know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. That was quite the lead-in. I hope I do it justice. My name is Jeff Ward. For the record, I am a Senior Assistant Attorney General and the Chief of the Criminal Justice Bureau at the Attorney General's Office. A member of my bureau spoke to the House Committee that addressed this bill, and we're here again to raise some of the same issues you have heard discussed. And I think first and foremost, it makes sense to emphasize for the committee that currently RSA 76B, as has been pointed out, requires reasonable suspicion that there's criminal activity taking place. Reasonable grounds is the term used in the statute, and that we can only get limited information under those circumstances. And as Lieutenant Kinsman raised, oftentimes the cyber tips that will come in through NCMEC to ICAC task forces are simply that they've found an image that may be child pornography, and they have an IP address associated with that. That's a series of numbers associated with that. That's the extent of the information they're provided. That information would not be suitable for a search warrant, but that information can be used through a 76B subpoena to gain additional limited information simply about who may be subscribing to that service, who that service may belong to, and how and where to find that person. The sponsor of the bill made a few statements that I want to address, and I think correct for the committee. First, and I think even in Lieutenant Kinsman's testimony, Senator French, you asked whether or not this statute as written or this bill as written would stop cyber tips. I understand that it's federal law that requires the cyber tips, but I have concerns that this bill would cause problems with cyber tips because the language is very broad in paragraph 1. Every communications common carrier shall require a valid search warrant before providing a government entity with any information related to its customers. So not just before providing them with the information in A through F, but with any information related to its customers. So a cyber tip that comes in is information related to a customer of an internet service provider, and that's that image is associated with this ISP address. So not only do I think this would be in conflict with the federal law as it currently stands, I think it would potentially prevent reporting of those cyber tips because that would fall under any information that a communications common carrier has. And the sponsor made a statement about along the lines of that individuals lose constitutional rights when they've committed a crime or lose Fourth Amendment rights when they've committed a crime. That's simply not the case, and I'm sure the committee is aware of that. Those constitutional rights stay in place, but that broad language in paragraph 1, I think, is the most concerning thing about this bill because it would severely limit the ability not only of law enforcement, but of communications common carriers, of telecommunications providers to provide that information to law enforcement if they see something problematic. And it's the exceptions listed that are cited in 644A3. So the committee is aware as well. 644A3 only deals with location data. Only deals with location data. So all the things mentioned, it's only that and under emergency circumstances, in essence, location data can be provided. So cell phone pings if you're trying to find somebody who's lost or missing or something along those lines. So those exceptions are not as broad, I don't believe, as they were presented to you, and certainly wouldn't address the issues I've raised. The other thing about the broad language in paragraph 1 is there are, in addition to administrative subpoenas, grand juries issue subpoenas all the time for information from communications common carriers, for phone record data, for the like. Because again, of the broad language in paragraph 1, shall require a search warrant for anything, this would also prohibit these companies from complying with grand jury subpoenas, which is another issue and another way that oftentimes this information is gathered by law enforcement, and of course, by vote of the grand jury to issue the subpoena under the broad powers that a grand jury has, that would disappear because of the broad language in paragraph 1 in this statute. So I think there are, as has been stated by many of the people speaking before you, significant unintended or even perhaps intended, but significant consequences to the passage of this bill that would most predominantly impact those initial investigative stages, those key initial investigative stages of child sexual abuse image crimes by hampering the law enforcement efforts there, and also by hampering the business's abilities, the telecommunications business abilities to cooperate and to help law enforcement as they should when they see that these things are going on their websites or through their telecommunications companies. So I don't want to take up too much of the committee's time, but I'm happy to answer questions. I know there were examples passed around of subpoenas. I don't have that, but I'm happy to take a look at it and address if there are any concerns or questions with respect to those, as well as it's our office that issues them.
So thank you very much. I was curious, I meant to ask the representative and I didn't. Do you know of any large abuse of what we have now that would require this tightening?
No. To put it simply, these are done in a very limited fashion. So again, it's my office. For the most part, as was pointed out, the county attorneys can issue some of them. They have to be trained through our office and authorized to do that. I actually conduct those trainings on how to do these types of subpoenas and what's required. And I train all the people inside our office who can do it. They're done in a very limited sense. I have probably done myself in 10 years, a handful of them. And so they're not done all the time. They're limited, and it's limited to the information listed in the statute. So it's the A through F, I believe, in the statute that we can get. There's no abuse that I've witnessed in any way, shape, or form. And again, they're focused to some degree on drug crimes, but for the most part on the internet crimes against children and the child sexual abuse image crimes.
So could you just repeat from, how many times have you used this?
Me personally?
Yeah,
So we can authorize them. So what happens is we receive, and it's actually outlined in our administrative rules, we have to receive a written request from law enforcement for this type of subpoena. We then go through a checklist with them about the types of information they're asking for. We have to be provided with the reasonable grounds, the reasonable suspicion in a written form, usually in the form of their preliminary police reports, as the basis for requesting this subpoena, and the basis that there has been some criminal activity committed. So it gets spread around about 15 or 20 people in the office who are authorized to provide these subpoenas. But in my 10 years as a criminal prosecutor in the Attorney General's office, I've probably done a handful of them.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's all I have for those wishing to speak. Anyone else wishing to speak on House Bill 1282? Then I'll close the hearing. You can have 2 minutes, and I gotta leave here at 10:25, so. I said he could have 2 minutes. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Everyone. We'll take two.